My name is Kate Peacock. I'm the HR director at Texel, which is a political risk and credit risk insurance broker in the city. I've been with Texel now for about 4 years. And when I joined Texel, it was 48 people. And in 4 years, we've doubled in size. So my pretty much a lot of my role has been scaling, helping to scale the business. So it will be a lot of recruitment that we've done. And the job is very much a generalist role. So you kind of get involved in everything so it can be anything from recruitment right through to supporting employees getting visas and all of those things. So it's a real broad role. But I would say that there are three key things that I would see as challenges certainly at Texel is preserving the culture. I just mentioned that we've doubled in size in the last 4 years. That ultimately means that there's undoubtedly a bit of a shift in the way we do things. And that results in hopefully trying to preserve a culture at the same time as making changes to the business. So we've very close-knit culture at the moment, and I hope we all want it to stay like that. So one of my biggest challenges is making sure that any processes, which is the next challenge, that we bring in means that we can try and preserve our culture. Because when you start bringing processes, formalities, there's a natural shift. So where some employees might have joined our business 5, 10 years ago to be entrepreneurial, to work in an environment that's quite agile, all of a sudden that proposition slightly changes because we're now scaling to the point we've doubled in size. So that means that in order for us to scale in the way that we want to, we have to have processes. We have to make sure that our processes operate for all employees so we have a fair company. And I think that those things sometimes can be a challenge for employees that joined maybe, like I say, 10 years ago and think, well, actually, I joined this business because it's small, because there's not a lot of hierarchy, there's not a lot of processes. I'm free to do what I want. I can be creative. I can be entrepreneurial. So it's trying to be able to assure people we can still be that, but it's just on a larger scale. And then I think the other thing around our challenges is that it's retaining our talent and making sure that we can still be appealing to those individuals that probably left large organizations to come to a smaller company for the reason that I just highlighted. They like the entrepreneurial side of working for an organization. They want the freedom. So yeah, I'd say those are the kind of main challenges for us. So as I say, culture, processes, and retaining our talent. So when I joined 4 years ago, there was no performance appraisal at all. And I'd gone from working in a large investment bank where we had very, very strict performance reviews. And they were quite, what's the word I'm looking for? They were actually quite destructive because they ended up making people compete with each other. So performance appraisal in my old company, big investment bank, was everyone got compared to each other and they had a nice bell curve, etc. But when I joined Texel, I knew that we needed a performance system, but I didn't want a heavy touch one. I wanted something that was light touch, easy for people to follow, because if you imagine you've gone from nothing to something, I needed to somehow get a win so that people would use it. And I liked Appraised because it wasn't a complex system, it's intuitive. It could be tailored, which I really liked. And yeah, and like I say, it's worked from that perspective. It is light touch, it does do what we ask it to do. It allows employees to create their own objectives. It allows employees to produce a self-review ready for a performance review. So I think those are the kind of light touch. That was the light touch process that I wanted, which we've got at the moment. I initially wanted it to be continuous feedback, but I think there's a reality with that. You always think, okay, the new way of working is people don't just want to have a performance, set their objectives at the beginning of the year. Mid-year, they'll have a mid-year review, and year-end, they'll have a year-end review. And I thought, no, let's not do that. Let's try and encourage continuous feedback. And we'll have a mid-year review and we'll have a year-end review. But in between all of that, let's just keep the conversation going so that the mid-year review doesn't become so onerous, nor does the year end. But the reality is that in a small business, feedback happens quite organically. And managers might sit right next door to the person that reports into them because they're a two-person team. So that didn't quite go as I thought it was going to go. And we kind of reverted to the traditional method of objectives set at the beginning of the year, because we operate on a calendar year, mid-year reviews and year-end reviews. But I have tried to keep them light touch. So what we do is employees will set their own objectives. We use personal development objectives as well, or goals, let's say, and they are more to indicate what training you need, which we can then run reports from. We don't use the feedback tool as much as we thought we were going to. As I said, it's because employees get regular feedback quite informally anyway, just by the nature of our business and the culture of the company. We have a mid-year review, and that's just really a check-in point. And then at year end, we do the self-review and a year end kind of, I don't think it's formal. I wouldn't say it's formal, but a year end catch up with your manager. So that's how the tool's used. We implemented our own values. I wouldn't say it's values driven, not as such, but we introduced our own Texel values that we have uploaded on the system. So we would ask where employees feel that they are contributing towards the values of the business as well. So that was how we tailored it. So the tailoring was in 3 areas. The placing our values on the system, number 1. Number 2, creating performance development goals, which is effectively what you need to be able to do your job better. So if that means training or if that means some mentoring, there was the opportunity to place it. And then the final thing is we use what's called CPD, which is continuous professional development. In our industry, particularly in the broking team, we have to clock up our hours of continuous professional development. And so we included a tile onto the appraise system where employees can go in and log their training. That may change in the future, but right now it's kind of fit for purpose. It's certainly not something that appraised using generalist was very much tailored to Texel's needs. I'm sitting here with loads of ideas in my head, but it is a challenge because, as I mentioned from the start, it's about educating employees to move into more of a formal structure, and we're not there. And it's a tricky one because of the very first thing that I mentioned about preserving the culture of Texel, preserving the flexibility, keeping agile, all of those things that attract employees to Texel, because we are still deemed a relatively small business. But some of the challenges that we find is that where you want to hold people to account, it's kind of difficult when you have a very, very light touch performance management system. So maybe the future might involve trying to create more than SMART goals. So maybe putting in some OKRs or some KPIs, or maybe even introduce 360. And dare I say it, give employees a bit of a rating that might then support a year-end compensation process. We're not there yet, and it's all ideas at the moment. But I do find that for a performance review to be really effective and used appropriately, I do think you need some kind of measurable, really measurable, tangible, measurable objectives. And I believe the one way that you can measure them is if you're using more like an objectives and key results style system. And number 2, maybe linking it to giving employees a rating so they know where they are. At the moment, if you don't have a rating, you don't really have KPIs or OKRs, it does feel way more light touch than possibly it should be. So I think we've gone from no performance review system, a light touch performance review system, and then maybe we need to start thinking about adding to it as we get bigger.